Hey everyone, it's Matt C, and this is a driven stories that I'm doing while I'm just kind of walking around because I'm trying to strike while the iron's hot. So, the past about 3 weeks or so, we've had less news about Kyrie, which is my comic, with the printer, and that's because the printer and I were kind of going back and forth about some stuff, and I don't. It's been complicated. I kind of feel like they did their due diligence, I did my due diligence, but still something kind of got lost in the translation. So no one's getting thrown under the bus, but there's been some complications. but things got worked out. Things got figured out, and now I think we're finally on the home stretch, and the actual good files are with them, and we're just going to get a final confirmation of that on Monday, I believe, and then we'll be ready to go on the China the factory side. And so basically, this video is about what freezes you out from acting, right? And I found what freezes me out. So what do I mean by that? So I discovered that when it comes to building whether it's like contributing to my channel, talking about news with my comic, talking about storytelling in general, finding motivation to keep going, I found that a I guess I found that gray areas, that's unclear situations that are out of your hands, formally speaking, that it's up to other people to decide the the outcome. That freezes me up, um, which is interesting because I found that when I'm in a failure position or a success position, I know how to act. I know how to deal with those things pretty well, especially if I get to determine what the next course of action is. If I don't, if it's in someone else's hands and it's pretty unclear, and it goes like that for 3 weeks, it kills my motivation, which is really interesting. Which meant that I had some other freelance. I was working on other stuff, but I could have been working on my Kyrie comic some more. I could have been putting out more content, but yeah, I just kind of dried up, which is really interesting. So discovering that means I know how to diagnose it now. So now I can, and I know what the outcome is. I know what the prognosis is in those situations. It means I just don't do anything until the thing gets resolved one way or another. And I know how to treat it. Which basically means I just have to acknowledge it and push through, which is interesting. So what freezes you up? Because these are, I'm trying not to use phrases like writer's block and stuff like that. It's kind of old hat terminology. I don't think it really goes anywhere. But I definitely think the freeze up is it's a real thing, and it can get you, you know. Yeah. So I'm trying to think of other examples. Uh, I guess a lot of times people feel when they have too many options, people freeze up sometimes. Sometimes they need someone on the outside to kind of give them a push one way or the other, or they themselves need to make a decision about what they need to know how to prioritize their options, storytelling wise, in order to narrow things down so they have parameters. That's probably true with most people. So that can freeze you up. Um, I think probably starting. This has to do with how you write, the kind of pipeline process for writing to begin with. You can freeze up because you started from the wrong direction. Maybe you started with the world and then you tried to populate it with characters, that don't really, when you should be starting with the characters and then filling out a world as an extension of those characters. Or maybe you, I don't know, you just kind of start with chapter 1, you start writing dialogue, and you see where things go from there. So you hit dead ends, right? There's many ways to hit dead ends, and you can get frozen up that way. So reorienting your how you write, which should be broad, defined, right? It should be big picture chunks, and then you kind of up the resolution as you go, so that dialogue is at the very end. And the biggest picture is your characters, not the world. People kind of lose sight of that, I guess, because the world physically is bigger than your characters, but really the story, there's nothing bigger than your characters in the story and the themes you're trying to bring out from those characters. Because your themes are personifications, or your characters are personifications of your themes, right? So kind of finding true north with your story, and how to write good stories effectively so that you minimize roadblocks. That is a way to get unstuck, unfrozen as well. And yeah, and then also I would suggest that there's another kind of, this is like a sidebar, but relying too much on others for validation, that freezes me up, because I'm never quite getting what I want out of out of their feedback, right? And that's usually because I'm asking too much of them. I need to ask things of myself and what I know that I like, because I can articulate to myself what I like. I do need feedback from them. Ultimately, I'm not gonna be the only one reading this book, so I need feedback from them. But getting validation as I'm writing is too much. Criticism and feedback is great, but relying on validation, that's probably a whole nother Drive Time update, isn't it? Or another Driven Stories, isn't it? Yeah, but so there's a lot of ways you can get stuck, you can get frozen, and identifying them, diagnosing them, is the first step towards curing them, or just, minimizing their pain. Living with this illness, and minimizing the side effects, and carrying through, because it's something that you're going to experience no matter what, but in various ways. But yeah, so that's kind of, I think that probably ties into what happened, because this, the problems that have happened the last 3 weeks haven't been necessarily to do with storytelling, but in a way it was me, probably, without getting into detail, maybe I was looking for validation rather than just feedback from other people, and I could have scoped that down somewhat. Yeah, and it's an interesting process, right? I guess in general I could say, and I think a lot of people deal with this. This is why crowdfunding campaigns, they succeed and then they don't get fulfilled very well, if at all. So many campaigns don't get fulfilled. I mean, I'd be afraid maybe like a third, maybe a quarter of campaigns, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, don't get fulfilled. That might be high. I don't know. I've seen a lot. It's not that uncommon. And maybe that has something to do with people working too much, too independently, too individualistically, and then once they have to work with others to actually get the thing printed, because they can't print it alone, they don't know how to rely on others. They don't know how to pick their team that's going to produce it. They don't know how to see things through to completion, because they only know how to produce things by themselves. So that can kind of frustrate. They can kind of freeze up things. But yeah, so there's a storytelling application. There's also just kind of a production application, all the way through to fulfillment, right? Just kind of knowing the next steps I want to do and not being able to do them until someone else gets their part done, and having to wait 3 weeks for that to get resolved, uh, that's like an icy chill to my motivation to get things going. But knowing that I can address it by being probably more proactive, probably managing my expectations, being clearer in communication would be good. Um, Making phone calls and not just emails, making emails and not just texts, kind of finding more clarifying ways of communicating, in other words, that would be good as well. I'm glad I just thought of that now. I should have called one of these people. One of them I've only been talking via email. Yeah. So that's kind of it's more. This is more of like a general motivating thing. Uh, Everyone gets stuck. Everyone gets frozen. Everyone has a different ways of this happening, but you need to find the way that this happens for you. You need to articulate what that is. You need to define it, and you can overcome it if you can define it. That's because you're going to need that. You're going to need more than definition, but you can't have less than that. So name it, uh, name it, and then move past it. Find the solution after you've categorized it, right? So that's the Driven Stories update. Is kind of a drive time update, isn't it? Right? It's kind of about the comic as well. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. Let me know if you have any in the comments. Let me know what you think about this. What freezes you up, you know, and we can talk about that in the comments. Yeah. So thanks, and I'll have more updates as things go along. More of these story things. Now that I feel unstuck, I'm gonna have more driven stories. You know, about writing, things of that sort. Insights that I think that I have on how to write, at least my perspective on how to write good stories, particularly for graphic novels, but really for anything, any kind of visual storytelling medium. And yeah, and then having drive time updates, which is just about news related to my comic getting made. So yeah, more of those coming soon. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.